I never meant to take her pills. That's the part one keep replaying in my head every night, like a quiet whisper that refuses to fade. It all started on a Monday morning, the kind where nothing feels right from the moment you open your eyes. I was running late, digging through the bathroom cabinet for my usual vitamins, half asleep and irritated at myself for not organizing anything. The cabinet was a mess, filled with her things, my things, old things, half-used things, and I just grabbed the first familiar bottle and swallowed 2 pills with a gulp of cold tap water. I didn't even look. No pause, no thought. Just swallowed and carried on. It wasn't until an hour later, while scrolling through messages on my phone, that I saw her text pop up. Hey, have you seen my pills? The hormonal ones? I can't find them anywhere. My stomach tightened. Hormonal? I glanced at the bathroom, trying to remember the exact label, but I had been in such a rush that everything blurred together. I checked the cabinet again and felt a strange chill run up my spine. My vitamins were still there, untouched. The bottle I took from wasn't mine. My heart started pounding so loudly I could almost hear it in my ears. Hormonal pills. Her hormonal pills. I didn't know what they would do to me. I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know if I should panic or pretend nothing happened. She came home early that day, holding the empty bottle I had left on the counter, and she looked at me with a mix of surprise and confusion. You didn't take these, did you? She asked. I couldn't lie. I nodded, swallowing hard. She didn't get angry, but she stared at me for a few seconds too long, like she was trying to decide whether this was a disaster or a strange twist of fate. It's fine, she said slowly. Just don't take any more. It's not dangerous. It just affects things. When I asked what things, she hesitated. It's complicated. But the thing is, even after she explained a bit, even after she reassured me that one dose wouldn't ruin my life, something in me already felt uneasy. I couldn't shake the thought that maybe my body had absorbed something it wouldn't forget easily. Maybe it had already begun adjusting to something it didn't need. I didn't notice anything for the next couple of days, but the thought kept haunting me. Every time I looked in the mirror, I expected to see something different, something wrong or unfamiliar. At first, nothing happened. I convinced myself it was just anxiety playing tricks on me. Then, on the 4th day, I woke up feeling oddly sensitive. Not in a dramatic way, just different. My skin felt warm and soft, like the surface of my arm reacted to my own touch in ways it hadn't before. Even the fabric of my shirt felt different when it brushed against me. I tried to ignore it, blaming the weather or maybe a detergent change, but deep down I knew that wasn't the case. My emotions were shifting too. Things bothered me more quickly. Little comments from people felt heavier. And I kept catching myself zoning out, imagining things I usually didn't think about, small things like how my face might look if it softened just a little, or how my expressions might change if my features weren't so harsh. I kept telling myself I was overthinking everything. One dose shouldn't have done anything. But that night, when I stepped out of the shower and wiped the fog off the mirror, I froze. It was subtle but there. My jawline looked a bit less rigid, like the edges were smoothing out. And maybe it was the lighting, but my cheekbones looked a little more defined. It didn't make sense. I leaned closer, searching for another explanation, but the more I stared, the more uncomfortable I became. My body wasn't wrong, but it wasn't exactly the same either. I told myself it had to be my imagination. But in the morning, the changes felt more real. My shirt fit differently around my chest, just barely, but enough to make me pause. I felt this strange tightness under my skin, like something was preparing to shift. I didn't say anything to her because I didn't want to sound ridiculous, but every hour that passed made the discomfort in my chest grow more noticeable. Not painful, just noticeable, like pressure building from the inside. That evening, she looked at me and narrowed her eyes slowly. "Are you okay?" she asked. I told her I felt strange, and her expression changed instantly. She guided me to sit down, her voice soft but serious. "There's something I didn't tell you," she said quietly. "My pills weren't a low dose. They're part of a strong regimen. Even one day can cause changes for some people." I remember staring at her, stunned. "Changes?" I repeated. She nodded. "Hormonal ones. Emotional ones. Physical ones.
My throat felt dry.
So, I'm what? Feminizing? She didn't answer right away. She just looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. Maybe concern, maybe regret. It's possible, she finally said. Your body might react more than others. Everyone is different. Her words echoed in my mind long after she left the room. I sat there numb, trying to understand what was happening to me. I kept thinking about my chest, the way it felt fuller, heavier, like there was something forming beneath the surface. I kept thinking about my skin, my emotions, the way my reflections seemed to shift each day. I thought about whether this was reversible, or if I was slowly stepping into something I didn't choose, or maybe something I never realized I was already standing close to. I lay awake that night, unable to sleep as my mind spiraled through fear, confusion, curiosity, and something else I didn't want to name yet. A strange calm. A weird sense that this wasn't just a mistake. Maybe it was an accident waiting for a meaning. Maybe it was a path that didn't start with choice, but one I might still choose for myself. And when I finally closed my eyes, my last thought was simple and terrifying. What if my body wasn't mistaken at all? The next morning felt like stepping into a version of my life that didn't entirely belong to me anymore. I opened my eyes slowly, hoping everything would feel normal again, that the tightness in my chest and the strange softness in my skin would disappear overnight like a weird dream. But the moment I sat up, I felt it again, a faint tenderness beneath my shirt, subtle but unmistakable. I pressed my hand lightly against my chest and pulled back instantly. It wasn't imagined. Something was happening there, something new and delicate forming beneath the surface. I stood in front of the mirror, heart pounding, trying to convince myself that nothing had changed, but the reflection staring back at me said otherwise. The angles of my face seemed a little gentler, like the edges were melting into smoother lines. Even my eyes looked different, or maybe it was the way I was looking at them, searching for signs that I didn't understand. I kept leaning closer, squinting, trying to catch myself in a lie, but the truth stared right back. My body was shifting, quietly, subtly, but undeniably. I grabbed a hoodie and pulled it over my head, trying to hide the changes I didn't know how to explain. She was already in the kitchen when I walked in, pouring coffee with slow movements that suggested she knew something I didn't. When she turned around and looked at me, her eyes widened for a brief second before she masked it with a neutral expression. "You look different," she said carefully. I didn't know whether to laugh, panic, or ask her to pretend nothing was happening at all. Instead, I just shrugged. "I feel different," I admitted. She set the mug down gently and motioned for me to sit. "Look," she said softly, "I didn't think one dose would affect you this much. But your body must be more sensitive to hormones. It happens to some people." I swallowed, gripping the mug tightly. "So what do I do?" She hesitated, studying my face like she was looking for something deeper than the changes on the surface. "You can wait it out," she said. "Some effects fade. Some don't. It depends on how your body reacts over the next few days." Her words didn't comfort me. They only stirred more questions. What if it doesn't fade? She held my gaze, and for the first time since this started, she looked genuinely concerned. Then she said softly, "You'll have to decide what this means for you." I didn't know what that meant. I didn't feel ready to decide anything. All I knew was that my chest felt strange, my emotions felt sharper, and my mind felt like it was split between fear and something I didn't want to name yet. She reached out and touched my shoulder gently. "We'll figure it out," she said. But her reassurance only made the tension inside me grow. Throughout the day, the changes felt more noticeable. My shirt brushed against my chest in a way it never had before, and every movement made me aware of a sensitivity I couldn't ignore. My skin felt softer, warmer, more reactive to every touch of fabric. Even the breeze felt different when it brushed against my arms. I started avoiding mirrors because every time I looked, I saw hints of someone else emerging beneath the surface of the person I used to be. That evening, I finally gained the courage to tell her everything. She listened quietly, arms folded, eyes focused. I told her how my skin felt different, how my emotions were shifting, how even my reflection felt unfamiliar. When I mentioned the tenderness in my chest, she inhaled sharply. "That means it's working," she murmured, almost to herself. "Working," I repeated. She nodded slowly. "Those pills are powerful. They're designed to trigger physical changes quickly. If you're reacting this much already, your body might be responding more strongly than usual." A wave of panic washed over me. "So I'm feminizing," I said, the words trembling as they left my mouth. She didn't deny it. "Yes," she said softly. "At least partially. But you need to breathe. This doesn't mean your life is over. It doesn't even mean something bad is happening. It just means something unexpected is happening, and we have to understand it." I paced the room, feeling my heartbeat thudding against the new sensitivity in my chest. "What if people notice?" I asked. She shook her head. "They won't, not yet. It's subtle, but you need to be aware of your body. These changes might continue for a while." That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of the way my life was shifting without my permission. I kept running my fingers lightly over my chest, feeling the faint rise under the skin, a softness that hadn't been there before. It scared me, but at the same time, a small part of me felt drawn to it, curious about what it might become. I hated admitting that to myself, but the feeling was there, quiet and persistent. Over the next few days, the changes grew more visible. My chest developed a slight curve, barely noticeable under loose clothing, but enough to make me hyper-aware of every movement. My facial features continued to soften, and people started looking at me longer as if trying to figure out what was different. My emotions became more unpredictable, swinging between confusion, fear, and a strange calm that felt almost comforting. I began to wonder if maybe the pills didn't cause the change so much as reveal something hidden inside me that had been waiting quietly. One afternoon, I caught her watching me with a thoughtful expression. When I asked what she was thinking, she hesitated before answering. "It's just, you look more like yourself lately," she said softly. Her words made my heart tighten. "More like myself?" She nodded. "I don't know how to explain it. You just look at ease."
Softer.
Lighter. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to argue, to insist that everything felt wrong and overwhelming. But another part of me, a part one didn't understand yet, wondered if she was right. Was I becoming someone I was meant to be? Or was I just losing control of the person I had always been? That question stayed with me all night. I stared at my reflection, tracing the contours of my face, the gentle slope forming in my chest, the subtle change in my posture. Every shift felt like a whisper telling me something I wasn't ready to hear. Maybe this wasn't a mistake at all. Maybe my body wasn't doing something wrong. Maybe it was doing something I had never allowed myself to imagine. And that thought, fragile and terrifying, was the one that refused to leave me. The changes were no longer something I could pretend weren't happening. By the next week, everything about my body felt like it was in a quiet, steady conversation with itself, shifting and adjusting in ways that made every moment feel unfamiliar. My chest had grown a noticeable swell, still small but undeniable, a gentle curve that changed the way shirts rested against my body. My skin felt impossibly soft, so smooth that even the simplest touch made me aware of how different I had become. My reflection no longer shocked me, but it didn't comfort me either. It simply stared back like someone new trying to understand who I used to be. Small things started happening too. My hair, which had always been stubborn and rough, began falling differently, softer at the ends and smoother when I ran my fingers through it. My waist felt a little narrower, not dramatically, but enough that my jeans fit oddly, looser in some places and tighter in others. Even the way I walked felt different, less rigid, as if my body was naturally adjusting its movements without my permission. I didn't tell anyone except her, and she became my quiet anchor during the changes. She watched everything carefully, sometimes too carefully, like she was studying a transformation she had only read about. One evening, she walked into the living room holding a small stack of folded clothes. I looked at them, confused. "These might fit you better," she said softly. I hesitated, staring at the fabrics. A few soft shirts, looser around the chest and softer in texture, and a pair of sweatpants with a stretchier waistband. I didn't want to accept them at first. It felt like admitting something I wasn't ready to say out loud. But I tried on the shirt anyway, mostly because the tightness across my chest had started bothering me, and the soft fabric felt like a relief against my skin. When I looked in the mirror wearing it, I froze again. The shirt didn't hide the curve of my chest, but it didn't emphasize it either. It just fit. And somehow, the gentler shape didn't look as wrong as I expected. It looked calmer, more aligned with the strange, quiet shift happening inside me. She watched me carefully. "How does it feel?" she asked. I didn't know how to answer. "Different," I finally said. "But not bad." She nodded like she had been expecting that. Over the following days, she helped me adjust without making a big deal out of anything. She handed me different lotions for my suddenly sensitive skin, suggested looser clothes, and reminded me to rest when the mood swings grew too strong. But she never pushed. She never labeled anything. She simply existed beside me, letting me figure out my place in the changes happening to my own body. Still, the world outside didn't slow down for me. When I went to the store one afternoon, the cashier stared at me with a puzzled expression. Not judgmental, just unsure, like she recognized something different but couldn't name it. "Are you feeling all right today?" she asked politely. I forced a smile and nodded, but I walked out quickly, my chest tightening with a new kind of anxiety. People were noticing. Even if they couldn't tell what was happening, they could sense something. It wasn't long before friends started asking questions too. "You look different," one of them said during a video call. "Did you lose weight? Or change something?" I shrugged it off, telling him I had been stressed lately, avoiding the camera whenever possible. I couldn't explain any of this to them. I didn't even understand it myself. All I knew was that the person they were used to seeing was slowly fading, replaced by someone gentler, softer, and caught between fear and acceptance. One night, after pacing the room for what felt like an hour, I finally asked her the question that had been building inside me. "What if this doesn't stop?" She looked up from her book, studying me with quiet seriousness. "Then you'll need to choose what you want to do," she said calmly. "You don't have to force yourself into anything, but you also don't need to run from it. Not everything that changes you is a mistake." Her words echoed in my mind long after the conversation ended. Not everything that changes you is a mistake. It lingered, sinking deeper into my thoughts with every passing day. Because the truth was, even though the changes scared me, even though a part of me wanted everything to go back to the way it was, another part of me, small, quiet, fragile, didn't hate what I was becoming. I didn't fully understand it, but I didn't resent it either. It felt like the beginning of a story I never thought belonged to me. A few days later, something happened that forced me to confront the truth more directly. I woke up feeling an intense sensitivity in my chest, sharper and heavier than before. When I looked in the mirror, I gasped softly. My chest had grown noticeably overnight, small but clearly developed, enough to create a gentle curve under my shirt that I couldn't hide anymore. My face looked different too, softer, almost glowing in the morning light. For a moment, I felt a surge of panic rising in my throat, but then something unexpected happened. Instead of spiraling, I just stood there, breathing, letting the reflection sink in. It wasn't wrong. It wasn't right. It just was. Later that day, she walked into my room and paused when she saw me. I was sitting quietly, staring at nothing, trying to process the changes. She sat beside me, without saying a word. We stayed like that for a long time until I finally whispered, "I don't know who I am anymore." She took a slow breath. "You're still you, just evolving." I looked down at my hands, the same hands I had always known but now softer, gentler. "What if I'm becoming someone I'm not supposed to be?" I asked. She shook her head. "I don't think that's what's happening. I think you're becoming someone you might have always been, even if you never realized it." Her words hit me harder than she probably intended. It was the first time someone suggested that maybe the change wasn't an accident, not entirely. Maybe the pills triggered something already there, buried under years of silence and assumptions. I didn't know if I believed it, but a small part of me wanted to. That evening, I went to my room, closed the door, and stared at my reflection for a long time. The person in the mirror didn't look like the boy I used to be. Yet they didn't look like a stranger either. They looked like someone gently unfolding, piece by piece, into a shape that felt unfamiliar but strangely comforting. I traced the curve of my chest through my shirt, felt the softness of my face, noticed the way my posture had changed. And slowly, quietly, something inside me whispered a truth I wasn't ready to say aloud. Maybe this wasn't a mistake at all. The more my body changed, the more my mind struggled to keep up. What had begun as a single accidental dose had turned into something that shaped every hour of my day. I woke up each morning wondering what part of me would feel unfamiliar next, and each night I lay awake, trying to understand the quiet emotions curling beneath my skin. There was no switch I could flip to stop it, and no clear path to follow. It felt like walking through fog, guided only by instinct and the gentle voice inside me that kept getting louder with each passing day. My chest developed a small but noticeable fullness, soft and tender to the touch. Clothing rubbed differently, weighed differently, drew my awareness in ways I had never experienced. Even loose shirts couldn't completely hide the curve, and I found myself folding my arms across my chest out of habit whenever someone walked by, even at home. My face softened more too, the hard edges fading into smoother lines that made my expressions gentler, almost delicate. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a reflection that didn't match the memories in my head. Yet it didn't feel wrong, just unexpected. My emotions were changing too. Everything felt heightened, not in a chaotic way, but in a deeply felt, raw way that left me more open than I had ever been. I found myself caring more about small things, reacting more to music, movies, conversations. Even my own thoughts felt different, shifting into patterns that didn't follow the same rigid structure they used to. It was unsettling, but at times it felt strangely natural, like I was learning myself again from the inside out. She noticed everything. She didn't stare or analyze loudly, but her eyes followed the details I tried to hide. One morning, she placed a soft hoodie on the back of a chair and said quietly, "This might feel better." I tried it on, and the fabric was light against my skin, gentle across my chest, comfortable in a way my old clothes weren't anymore. I whispered a quiet thank you, and she smiled like she understood more than I was saying. The world outside, however, wasn't as gentle. When I walked through the neighborhood, I caught glimpses of curious looks from people who sensed something different about me. Not obvious, but enough to make them glance twice. Even the way I carried myself began to shift unconsciously, my step softer, my posture less tense. It was as if my body was quietly learning a new language without asking permission. One afternoon, she and I sat together on the couch in a strange silence. I could feel her studying me, thinking carefully before speaking. "Can I ask you something?" she said. I nodded. "How do you feel about everything? Honestly." Her voice wasn't heavy with worry, just patient. I took a long breath, unsure how to begin. "I'm scared," I admitted. "I don't know who I'm becoming. I don't know if this is temporary or something else." She nodded slowly, giving me space to continue. "But at the same time," I whispered, "there's something about the changes that doesn't feel completely wrong. I don't know what it means yet. I don't know if I'm supposed to go back or go forward." She looked at me with a calm, steady expression. "You don't have to decide today," she said softly. "You don't have to force yourself into an answer. Not everything needs to be named right away." I turned toward her, the breath in my chest tight with emotion. "But what if I'm changing into someone no one recognizes?" She reached out and gently held my hand. "Then you'll decide who gets to stay. The people who care about you won't leave just because you're becoming more yourself." Her words hit something deep inside me, something I had been avoiding. Becoming more myself. Was that what this was? I didn't know. But the idea stayed with me long after she released my hand. Later that night, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my reflection in the dim light. My features looked even softer than earlier, and the curve in my chest more pronounced. I leaned forward, touched the mirror lightly, and whispered to the reflection, "Who are you becoming?" The reflection didn't answer, but the question felt important. The next few days passed in a blur of small realizations. I found myself brushing my hair differently, not because I was forcing a change, but because it simply fell into place that way. My shirts felt more comfortable when they draped loosely, so I stopped wearing the tighter ones. I even caught myself adjusting my posture in ways that felt more natural, my shoulders relaxing, my movements softer. It wasn't intentional. It was simply happening. But the real turning point came one quiet evening when she knocked lightly on my door. "I need to show you something," she said. Her voice was gentle, almost hesitant. She handed me a small makeup bag, the kind with soft colors and simple patterns. I stared at it, confused. "I'm not trying to push anything," she said quickly. "I just think you might appreciate exploring this. Not because you have to. Just because it might help you understand what you're feeling." I opened the bag, slowly. Inside were soft brushes, simple shades, natural tones. Nothing dramatic. Nothing loud. Just subtle tools. My throat tightened with an emotion I didn't know how to name. "I don't know how to use any of this," I said quietly. She smiled. "I can show you if you want. But only if you want." I hesitated for a long moment. I could have said no. I could have closed the bag and pretended none of this was happening. But instead, I found myself nodding. She sat beside me and guided my hand, showing me how to apply a touch of color, how to soften the shadows around my eyes, how to highlight the gentle curves forming in my face. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't transformative. It was delicate, subtle, almost invisible unless you looked closely. Yet when I looked in the mirror afterward, I felt something inside me shift. Not in fear, not in confusion, but in recognition. It felt like I was looking at a version of myself I had never met, but who had always been waiting quietly beneath the surface. Someone softer, someone calmer, someone who didn't feel out of place in their own skin. I sat there for a long time, staring at my reflection, feeling the weight of everything pressing gently against my chest. She watched me quietly. "What do you see?" she asked. I swallowed hard. "Someone I'm not afraid of," I whispered. She nodded. "That's a good start." That night, I lay in bed with a restless ache in my heart. Not fear, not confusion, but something like hope tangled with uncertainty. I didn't know where this path was going, but for the first time since the changes began, I didn't feel like I was running from it. I felt drawn to it, uncertain but curious. Maybe this wasn't a mistake. Maybe it was a beginning. The morning after she showed me the makeup, I woke with a strange stillness inside me, as if my mind had finally paused long enough for me to hear my own thoughts clearly. There was no panic in my chest, no rushing sense of losing control. Just a quiet awareness that something in me had shifted the night before, something I could no longer ignore. When I went to the mirror, I saw a familiar softness in my features, not because of the makeup, but because of who I was becoming. The person staring back didn't frighten me anymore. It felt like seeing a version of myself I had never allowed to exist. The changes hadn't stopped. My chest was fuller, small but unquestionably present, rounding gently beneath my shirt. My waist felt slimmer, my skin softer, and even the way I stood had changed, as if the transformation had reached deeper than the surface. But instead of recoiling from the reflection as I once did, I found myself lingering, tracing the delicate shifts in my face, the smoothness of my jaw, the slight glow in my cheeks. The emotional pressure that used to pound inside me felt lighter now, replaced by a hesitant acceptance I didn't know how to express. When she saw me that morning, she paused in the doorway, her eyes softening. "You look calmer," she said quietly. I nodded. "Something changed," I whispered. "Not physically inside." She stepped closer, studying my face with gentle attention. "What changed?" I hesitated, unsure if I could put it into words. "I think I'm not fighting it anymore." She didn't smile immediately. Instead, she placed her hand lightly on my shoulder, grounding me. "You don't have to choose everything today," she said. "You don't need a label. You don't need answers. You just need to let yourself be honest with whatever this feels like." I let her words settle, feeling the tension slowly unwind from my body. Throughout the day, I kept catching myself in moments of unfiltered thought, small glimpses of the person I might become. Not forced, not imagined, just quietly emerging. When I tied my hair back, it fell differently. When I walked, my steps felt lighter. When I laughed, it sounded softer, almost musical. And when I sat down to rest, I found myself curling slightly inward, shoulders relaxed in a way that felt more natural than the rigid posture I had worn for most of my life. Later that afternoon, I found myself staring into my closet, realizing that most of my clothes no longer fit the way they used to. Not just physically, but emotionally. They belonged to someone who felt distant now. Someone who didn't match the face in the mirror. I reached for the clothes she had given me earlier in the week, the soft shirts, the gentle fabrics, the looser fits. When I wore them again, they didn't just feel comfortable. They felt right. When she saw me wearing them, she exhaled softly. Not in surprise, but in quiet recognition. "You look like you're starting to feel at home," she said. I didn't argue. I didn't hide. I simply nodded. Maybe I am. That evening, she sat beside me on the couch, her presence calm and reassuring. "Can I ask something?" she said. I nodded. "Do you want the changes to stop or continue?" The question lingered between us like a delicate thread I wasn't sure I should touch. I stared at my hands, the softness in them now unmistakable. I thought about my reflection, the curve in my chest, the gentle shifts in my emotions, and the way my heart felt more open than ever before. "I don't know," I whispered. "But I don't think I want to go back." She looked at me carefully. "And going forward?" I swallowed. "I think I want to understand who I'm becoming. I want to see where this goes." Her expression softened, not with excitement or judgment, but with deep understanding. "Then I'll be here," she said simply. The next few days felt like opening a door I had spent my entire life pretending didn't exist. Not rushing through it, not running from it, but slowly stepping forward, letting the air on the other side reach me in quiet waves. I tried simple things, small steps that didn't overwhelm me. A different hairstyle, softer clothing, the faintest touch of makeup on days I felt brave. Not to hide, not to perform, just to explore. With each small step, something inside me unfurled. Not dramatically, but gradually, like a flower opening in slow motion. My reflection became less of a stranger and more of a companion. My emotions aligned with my thoughts instead of crashing into them. My body felt less like something happening to me and more like something I was growing into. One morning, as I stood in the kitchen pouring tea, she looked at me with a quiet smile. "You seem lighter," she said. I breathed in, letting the warmth settle into my chest. "I think I'm learning myself," I replied. She nodded. "You're allowed to." But the world outside eventually needed me to. And facing it was harder than facing the mirror. The whispers, the second glances, the subtle confusion in people's eyes when they looked at me, it all made my chest tighten again. Not because they saw something wrong, but because they saw something they didn't understand. I tried to shrink myself at first, pulling my shoulders inward, lowering my voice, avoiding eye contact. But each time I did, she reminded me gently, "You don't have to disappear." The turning point came unexpectedly, during a visit to a small shop. I was quiet, nervous, hugging my chest out of habit. The cashier, a woman with kind eyes, glanced at me for a moment, then smiled softly. "I love your hair," she said. Simple words, but they hit harder than she could have known. For the first time, someone outside the house saw something in me without confusion, just acceptance. I thanked her quietly, my heart pounding, but in a good way. When I returned home, I told her about it, and she smiled knowingly. "Sometimes the world is gentler than we expect," she said. And sometimes I realized the world would only be as gentle as I allowed myself to be. By the end of the month, the changes felt stable, not chaotic. My body had softened into a form that felt peaceful. My chest was small but present, a quiet reminder of the transition I never planned. My face held a subtle curve that matched the softness in my voice. And my mind felt clearer than it had in years. One night, I sat by the window, watching the streetlights glow softly against the quiet road. She joined me moments later, You look like someone who has something to say, she whispered. I took a breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle gently on my shoulders. I think this is who I'm supposed to be, I said quietly. Or, at least, I think I want to find out. She touched my hand, warm and steady. Then you're not alone. The world didn't change with my words. My life didn't suddenly become simple. But something inside me settled, a truth I had been carrying without understanding. The accident that had once terrified me became the beginning of something I didn't know I needed. Not because the pills chose my path, but because they opened a door I had never dared to touch. And as I looked in the mirror one last time before bed, seeing the gentleness in my features and the quiet confidence in my eyes, I realized something with complete clarity. My body wasn't mistaken. It was finally telling the truth.